nerds, what's up? Today I wanted to talk about reading an author's entire bibliography. And I'm not just talking about authors who only have a few works to their names or authors who have primarily written a single series. I'm kind of thinking about authors who both have a lot of breadth and depth to their work. I was having a hard time fully defining what I meant and the rules for what counted and what didn't. And during my research, I came across a new to me word that perfectly described what I was trying to get across. And that word is oeuvre, a word that means a substantial body of work constituting the life work of a writer, an artist, or a composer. And it clicked. This is what I meant. This is the feeling I wanted. The intentional study of a substantial amount of work that you are looking for to get an insight into the life work and the body of work of a single individual. Although I am close to reading full bibliographies for authors like Joe Abercrombie or Brandon Sanderson, and a few authors I've technically finished their entire bibliographies, but they haven't written enough to really count for this discussion yet, kind of like Susanna Clark, I have officially only intentionally done a bibliography read for 3 authors, who are George R. R. Martin, Ken Liu, and Neil Gaiman. Yes, I know, something that's not funny at all, but is actually kind of funny, is that I finished my bibliography read of Neil Gaiman about 2 months before the allegations came out. I have an entire video on that subject if you're interested in my thoughts on what happened, and although I will not be promoting him today, I'm also not going to pretend that that doesn't exist and that it is not something I have done, because I did do it, and it will be a little bit relevant for our discussion today, but I wanted to acknowledge that. It's funny because there is a huge variety of authors who have written my favorite works of all time, but very few authors have inspired me to sit down and say, I'm going to read every single thing this person has ever published. There's some similarities in the people I've chosen. They have all written a book I would consider to be a favorite book of all time. They are all very strong prose writers. They all have a very specific point of view with clearly a specific something to say. They are all very creative and tend to express ideas in a vast variety of ways. And of course, they are all fantasy writers, which probably isn't a surprise for me. I also remember the exact moment when I made the decision to read their bibliographies. For Ken Liu, it was after I read The Paper Menagerie. I had actually only read Grace of Kings before then, and The Paper Menagerie had such a breadth of ideas and different writing styles and was so wonderful and amazing and incredible that I knew right then I would read everything he had ever written. For Martin, it was after I finished A Dance of Dragons and the vacuum it left in my heart that I knew I would have to search out everything he had ever written. And for Neil Gaiman, it was actually quite a bit later. I had read a few different ones of his works, some of which I actually didn't like, but it was after American Gods when I realized how different everything I had read by him was. And I loved American Gods so much that I was interested in seeing, for good or for bad, what else he had to say. They have to have this quality that I know I will gain something from reading what they have to say, whether I like it or not, rather than just kind of picking and choosing books that seem the most interesting for me, which often happens with other authors that I love. So today I just want to talk about 3 things that reading bibliographies has taught me. Let's get into it. Number 1, you'll probably never like 100% of anything a single person has to say. Clearly, these have to be favorite authors of mine to even do this. I've done it for so few. These are favorite authors. And despite that, they all have books or multiple books I rated 3 stars or lower. For Gaiman, I rated Stardust 2.5 and Sandman 3. For Martin, I rated Armageddon Rag a 2 and Hunter's Run a 1, although if you guys know me at all, you know I don't blame him for that, but rather his co-writers. And for Ken Liu, I rated All That We See or Seem 3 stars. So maybe not everyone's like this, but I think a lot of us, and especially me, is just never going to have an author who is super prolific be able to write 100% of books that are going to please me. I think it would be very difficult, especially because I tend to do this with authors that I feel like have a lot of breadth. They write in different genres, they write unique things, they want to try new things. And inevitably, if you have authors like that and they try new things, you're not always going to like it. And those are the kind of authors I tend to want to read bibliographies the most because it never gets boring because it is so varied. And I just feel like it's natural. And this is an interesting thing that I think it's given me in that it has given me the ability with a lot of different authors that knowing if they write something I don't love, I don't immediately have to walk away or if I kind of feel like it's the end of the world, I can give it some time and several novels before I decide, well, maybe this author is going in a direction that just doesn't work for me anymore. Now, I have an example of this, and can everyone be cool? Because I almost feel like I shouldn't talk about it, but I'm going to, so be cool. Most recently, I kind of noticed this impacting the book sphere when Winds of Truth by Brandon Sanderson came out. Now, I am not here to talk about the book itself, okay? I need you to just divorce this conversation from how you personally felt about the book. There were a ton of valid criticisms, and I am not taking that away. I had criticisms of that book. And there were a lot of people who were already worried about Stormlight before this. People who were iffy about Oathbringer, really didn't, maybe really didn't like it, but it was meh on Rhythm of War. And then they got to Wind and Truth, and they said, you know what? Sanderson's just writing a direction I don't really like anymore. That's all cool. I'm not saying it. But there were several people whose videos I watched who had not had a single problem with a Sanderson novel previously. They loved Rhythm of War. They loved all of the secret projects. Everything was aces, aces, aces. And then they didn't like Wind and Truth, and they made very dramatic videos about how they were done with him forever and how upset they were and all that stuff. Now, here's the thing. I understand being disappointed in the 5th installment of a series that's supposed to kind of be an end cap for a while. I get it. But I was really surprised about the idea of not liking one book was enough for this author that you've loved for years to completely give up on them. I know it's weird, but I feel like I might have been that way at one point in my life. But because I have gone down this road of reading a favorite author's complete works and realizing they wrote stuff that I thought were complete stinkers, but then so much else that literally shaped me as a reader, that I just feel a little bit more chill when a book disappoints me a little bit. This happened very recently. All That We See or Seem, which I said was the lowest rated Ken Liu book I gave, it was 3 stars. That was his newest release. And it didn't really hit for me. I was just I didn't really love it. And yeah, of course it's disappointing because I was really looking forward to a new release from a favorite author, but it also just wasn't a big deal to me. It's well, I'll catch the next one and it'll probably be great. You know what I mean? That's just going to happen. I feel like it's just given me a lot of perspective in my reading. And those disappointments don't hurt as bad anymore for me because I just know that I can catch the next one. And yes, I have had some authors where I've loved something and then 3 books go by and I realize they're kind of just writing in a way I don't love anymore and I just stop reading them. But there's so many other authors that I don't maybe have to take it as personally. Number 2, it's fascinating to study and see how authors explore specific themes again and again in their works. One of the coolest things I gained from these bibliography reads was how often the same theme would crop up again and again and again across this entire breadth of work, whether that was intentional or often, in my opinion, I think very unintentional. You'll sort of kind of pick up they're exploring that again. Interesting. It reminded me a little bit of an interview I did a while ago with Django Wexler and Fonda Lee at a Barnes & Noble's, where during the Q&A session, one of the audience members asked them what their favorite tropes were, and they said this about it.
Oh gosh, a favorite trope. I don't know, tropes are screwdrivers.
Yeah.
Right? There's so many of them and you kind of pick the tools that you need.
It's hard to pin down. I probably have to go and read a bunch of my stuff and be oh, I do have a favorite trope.
I'm sort of similar to you in that I can see recurring themes, right? Rather than be oh, what's my favorite trope? There's kind of this thing of you write a bunch of stuff and then you're oh, that's interesting. I keep doing that. Or readers tell you, what you've written after you've written it.
I don't like to think of books in terms of tropes when I'm writing them.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of talk back and forth are oh, is this obsession with tropes bad? Is it good? Whatever. And I think, my opinion, so take it for what it's worth, is that it's fine for readers. It's fine as an analysis tool to compare stories. But when you start using it as a way to construct stories, it's a quick way to get into stereotypes.
Mm-hmm. No, it's a really good point because at one point I remember seeing my book on tvtropes.com and it listed all these things and I was interesting. I didn't even really think of it that way or never identified,
oh, that's
most
true.
of those.
And I'm that's a stretch.
Yeah, I know, right?
Exactly.
Oh, right, exactly. So when you're writing the story, you're just trying to be true to the characters and you're trying to be true to the narrative. And then afterwards people will be oh, that's this, and that, only because they're kind of picking it out and sort of comparing it to all the other like stories that are out there, right?
I really loved the way they both kind of explained like, there that is again. That theme is of readers pointing out that I keep writing about that theme. I didn't even recognize it. And how they kind of had to think about themselves, like, why am I experiencing that? And I think as a reader, you are in the unique position to maybe see it from an outside lens, because obviously it is not as personal to you as it is to the writer when they're in it creating the work. And kind of learning about a particular subject through one person's eyes from a lot of different angles can just really deepen your appreciation, I feel like, both for literature and exploring whatever topic it is. And maybe make you even a closer reader as you start making those intertextual connections naturally, because you are examining one person's writing. It's a lot easier, I think, to kind of see those through lines. And obviously intertextual connections are a huge part of literacy. And it just comes a lot more naturally, I feel like, when you focus on a single author's work. In Ken Liu's work, I saw a lot about how history shapes us, both your personal history and like global country at whatever stage history. He talks a lot about cultural clashes and modernity and how technology shapes us. For George R. R. Martin, I saw a lot of explorations about how you can never go back. Explorations about loneliness and explorations about what does honor mean and look like. You start to see their language and point of view, and maybe even understand the theme a little deeper and their works a little deeper as you connect them. And number 3, you can really begin to dig into where death of the author begins and ends for you. Okay, before we get fully into this topic, we need to talk about what death of the author means, because I feel like on the internet, we've colloquially started using the term death of the author to mean when you reject an author's personal politics, or you don't agree with something that they have done, but you are still engaging and reading their works. It's kind of a signal to be like, I don't know what they've said or what they've done, and I don't agree with it, but I'm still engaging in this. But today, when I want to discuss death of the author, I am talking about the original and traditional meaning of the phrase, which was coined by Roland Barthes in his French essay La Mort de l'auteur in 1967. And I know I butchered that French. I'm sorry, it's butchered. It talks about how at the time, literary analysis really focused on the author's intended meaning and how their personal history shaped that intended meaning, and how you really weren't supposed to take into account what the reader brought to the table at all. A quote from a translated version of the essay reads, "The unity of a text is not in its origin, it is in its destination. But this destination can no longer be personal. The reader is a man without history, without biography, without psychology. He is only that someone who holds gathered into a single field all the paths of which the text is constituted. The reader has never been the concern of classical criticism. For it, there is no other man in literature but the one who writes. We are now beginning to be the dupes no longer of such antiphrases, by which our society proudly champions precisely what it dismisses, ignores, smothers, or destroys. We know that to restore to writing its future, we must reverse its myth. The birth of the reader must be ransomed by the death of the author." I love that full quote, by the way. As often with famous quotes, we tend to cut them short, and I like that it is actually "for the birth of the reader must be ransomed by the death of the author." I think quite often in our daily reading life, we now do this quite naturally. We probably halfway kind of get between our own personal histories and our own personal views of the books, and perhaps think the other half about maybe the author's intended meaning, or maybe kind of look into what might have shaped this work. And I think it's often influenced by who we are reading. For example, if you're reading more of a historically important book, you might be more interested in how it came to be. I know for me, when I read books like 100 Years of Solitude, or most recently The Bell Jar, or books like that, I am more interested in the personal history of the author because it feels like it shapes contextually what you are reading, versus other books where it might not feel as important to me. But when you're doing an entire bibliography read of an author that is quite prolific, I feel like it is very natural for you to gain a curiosity about the person themselves and how it shaped the works you are reading, because you are spending so much time with them. Now, authors' personal lives aren't always for consumption, and nor should they be. We don't know everything about authors, although I will say we do know a lot more today than we used to. So you might not always get answers to why certain thematic elements might appear again and again and again. You might only be able to make guesses. But sometimes an author's history will kind of enlighten those things. For example, Ken Liu is Chinese American. He lived in China before moving to America. I think I can't remember. It was like 8 maybe. That contextualized a lot of how he writes about culture clashes and why he focuses a lot on Chinese history. Obviously, that is a part of his life and gives maybe new meaning to those themes that he explores. Now, I want to be clear, I'm not saying these things are one-to-one. It actually bothers me quite a bit when people think that everything someone writes needs to be autobiographical or somehow be a self-insert. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I do think it's interesting when you can make connections to someone's past and how it might influence the themes that they're exploring. It reminds me, again, a lot of what Fonda Lee was saying in that clip, that maybe the author doesn't even realize why they are writing about that, but as a reader, an outside perspective, we may be able to make those connections. And I think sometimes being in that mind frame can make me view certain works differently. I feel like rereading A Clash of Kings after finishing George R.R. Martin's entire bibliography did change my reading experience a little bit. I felt like I was more in tune with the thematic elements that he often explores and more in tune with kind of how he writes those things. And I feel like I was just making easier contextual kind of connections as I read. Now, would I have been able to do that if I hadn't done that and it was just a normal reread? Probably. It probably didn't affect it that much. But I felt like I had a deeper understanding, knowing how we got there and seeing kind of all that lead up gave me even more appreciation for this series that was already my favorite. It really felt to me like, oh, that's that word, ovra. That's where it really matters, when you can contextualize these works as a whole person's body of creation. And obviously I am using the word a little differently because these are 3 living authors, so it is not their full bodies of work yet because they are still writing, and it's déclassé to make the joke I know you all want to make, so spare me. So should you do it? I don't know. That's going to be up to you. I think a lot of people have probably naturally done this with about 1 or 2 authors that are maybe wrote a favorite book and you kind of just read them naturally. I do think it's interesting if you've done that to maybe dig a little deeper to that author and see if they've written short stories or written other things you didn't know about and really do like a full, deep bibliography dive. I don't think you need to do it to be a fan of someone or for any particular reason. I tend to do it really for learning purposes. When I do that specific deep dive, I am specifically thinking about it as their full body of work that I am looking at and doing it to compare it. I feel like it helps expand my thinking skills and my reading skills, and so it is why I have enjoyed doing it. I obviously haven't done it very often. It does take a considerable time commitment, especially again if you're choosing someone pretty prolific. It's going to take a while. But I do think if you have an author that you've been thinking of doing it for and you are interested, I think it's worthwhile to do at least once. I guess I'll say it that way. I should also say, I don't think you need to do it back to back to back to back. I think one way to make it enjoyable is if you do spread it out over some time so you can give yourself a break from reading the same kind of tone. When I did it with all these authors, I didn't do it back to back. I'm thinking the fastest one I did was probably George's. But even that I did over a full year. And Ken Liu's and Neil Gaiman's, I think I did over 2 years. You know, it doesn't have to be something you're doing immediately. It can kind of be a slow thing that it's almost like you're revisiting an old friend. Anyway, I'd love to know if you've done this and if you enjoyed it, what you thought of it. Did you get kind of the same things out of it that I did? Or were you like, nope, felt kind of normal, like doing anything else? Let me know. If you like these kind of videos, please like and subscribe. That's the best way to support me. I also just very recently started Patreon, so if you want some extra videos and some extra content, you can go check out if anything's interesting over on Patreon. The link is in the description box. And if you want to see what I'm currently reading as well as other nerdy rants, you can check me out on Instagram at bookborn.reviews. I'll see you next time. Bye.